Thanks for the introduction. So hello, everybody. Today, I will be speaking about the comparison between multiband and multiband multiecho. So the main motivation for us was to compare which sequence to choose between multiband and multiecho when you're doing the resting state fMRI study. And as we all know that both of these sequences have different kind of advantages. So let's have a recap of what are these different sequences differences. So as we all know, during the single echo EPI, we have a single readout during which we acquire the slice, and due to the long readout, we have the distortions. And on the other hand, in multi-echo, we have multiple readouts, and we acquire during the different echoes, and the readout is shorter, we have less distortions. And we also have different TEs during the multi-echo, and we combine it, and we have increased sensitivity of bold in multi-echo. In parallel, multiband EPI excites multiple slices, and that can reduce the TR considerably. And it has also been shown that the high number of volumes per unit time increases the z-scores in fMRI. So a bit on the physiological noise correction, because I will be dealing with how different sequences might be affected by using different kind of physiological noise correction. So the most common method of using the physiological noise correction has been retro-ICOR. It's an image-based cleaning method, and during this, you need an extra measurements during the scanning. The next one is FIX, and it's commonly used today for cleaning the multiband data. And it's a compulsory part of pre-processing pipeline in HCP, but you need to train your own classifier to remove the noise from your data. And then the last one is multi-echo ICA. It has been debated that it is the most favorable approach to clean multiband multi-echo data, as it differentiates between bold and non-bold, depending on the TE dependency. So let's recap on fixed classifier. So fixed classifier depends upon training your own classifier, and the training of the classifier depends upon the time series of the ICA components, and also the spatial maps, and also the final is the power spectrum. And you look into these different features, and you try to classify them in categories of signal and noise. So we train our own classifier. We acquire 10 subjects for multiband and multiband multi-echo. The next is multi-echo ICA. So in multi-echo ICA, after the spatial decomposition of your data, you fit the time series components depending on the T2 star fit. And after the T2 star fit, we have kappa and rho that describe the goodness of fit. So along this line, this means the kappa, and that is more bold-like. And along this line, it's more non-bold-like. So these triangles, it represents the amount of variance that will be removed from each component. And it can be seen from this graph that non-bold is removing quite a lot of variance from the multiband multi-echo data. And we will see the effect of this removal of variance later on in the results section. So what do we know so far? From the literature, it has been seen that increasing the multiband factors will give you high multiband, high z-score value, but until you are on the limiting factors of g-noise, you can increase the multiband acceleration factor, and you will be benefiting from low TR and high volumes. And the next, in multiband multi-echo, it has been shown in the study that it increases the specificity of bold specifically in MBME with fix in comparison to multi-echo, and this study was done on the 7 Tesla data. And the final study was done in comparison of multiband multi-echo with multi-echo, and they found that multiband multi-echo performed superiorly in comparison to multi-echo for the specificity. So going a bit towards our approach, what we were interested in. So as both of these sequences are commonly used today in fMRI, so the comparison resting state network sensitivity in unclean data, both in multiband and multi-echo, and the clean data by using both the fixed cleaning and the multi-echo ICA cleaning. So a bit more in experimental protocol. So we acquired 15 subjects in 2 different sessions, 24 hours apart. Each session was 20 minutes resting state scan for both multiband and multi-echo. We take care of the counterbalancing on the next day by acquiring the different session on the second day. And we also acquired another 10 subjects for training our data set for both multiband fix and multiband multi-echo fix in order to train our own classifier. So a bit on the scanning protocol that we use, we use this acceleration factor of 6 for multiband, and we use the same acceleration factor for multiband multiecho to have the similar comparison between the two different sequences. On the pre-processing side, in order to avoid any surprises, we try to keep the pre-processing pipeline as similar as possible between the two different sequences. And by removing this, so for multiband, we have two different categories, multiband standard with the standard pre-processing and multiband fixed. We use fixed cleaning on top of that. And for MBME, as we have the recommended method that is mica, but on top we also want to see if you have the similar cleaning method, how does the result affects you with the similar and with a different kind of cleaning methods. So for the statistical analysis, we did the dual regression using the 10 components from Smith. And we will look into the mean scores, z-scores that we'll get from the dual regression, and we will look into the identifiability of the resting state network. So a bit on the identifiability, it's a quite new metric that is used in the literature, that it means that identifiability is actually the signal to noise ratio of your resting state network. It's taken into account the mean values inside the mask and outside the mask. And we will take these parameter estimate maps that you usually get from dual regression to do the non-parametric permutation testing within the FSL. And FSL randomization does give you threshold-free cluster enhancement maps, and all of these maps are family-wise error corrected. So we further corrected for multiple hypothesis testing. A bit on the dual regression. So in dual regression, we take the 10 components from Smith, and they are regressed against the pre-processed data. So you get the time course from each subject and in component, and these time courses are regressed against each individual, and that results in subject-specific parameter estimate maps and Z-maps. So when you have your Z-maps and you have your parameter estimate maps, you use a dual regression, you can find the statistical significant difference between groups. So first, we will look into the multiband standard. Without any cleaning, what is the difference between sequence? And by using their most favorite cleaning method in multiband and the most favorite cleaning method in multiband multiecho, what is the differences between the sequence or in the resting state network sensitivity? So what we found was, on average, mean z-scores after dual regression were higher in multiband multiecho mica than multiband multiecho fix. The one reason that we think is that because multiecho ICA is removing a lot of signal variation from the data, and it does give you high z-scores value all across the brain, and that's why that you have high z-scores in multiecho ICA in comparison to multiband multiecho fix. But if you just want to see which one has the high z-score value between the sequences, then multiband multiecho have high z-scores in comparison to the multiband. So looking into the identifiability of the networks, we found that multiband multiecho has higher identifiability than multiband, and we also find that multiband multiecho, when it is cleaned with multiecho ICA specifically, we find that it has low identifiability. We think the reason is that because it has high z-scores all around the brain, and we take the ratio of this value, you get the low identifiable value. But if you look at the values across MBMB fix, it's quite better than multiband multiecho mica. So let's look into the statistical significant maps between multiband standard and multiband multiecho standard when they are not clean, both of the sequence. We actually find no differences between these two different sequences. They both are good in their different regards, and there are no difference if they are not cleaned. So let's see what happens when we clean them. So when multiband is cleaned with fix and multiband multiecho is cleaned with mica, we found that multiband fix is performing better in most of the networks in comparison to multiband multiecho. So in conclusion of these 3 points that I discussed recently, that, okay, there is no difference in these sequences when you're comparing the resting state network sensitivity, and the identifiability is higher in multiband multiecho, and also the last mean z-scores value are also higher in multiband multiecho. So we were a bit surprised, okay, why then the significant difference is not appearing when you clean the data in multiband multiecho if the mean z-scores and the identifiability is higher in multiband multiecho. So the next step we took was to try to compare both of the sequence when they have the similar cleaning method without having any surprises from the cleaning different techniques. So we wanted to have the similar method, and then we found that actually multiband multiecho has some differences. There is no huge difference between these two, but there are some differences in these 3 networks, but these differences are not in multiband, they are in multiband multiecho. So this was one this is one the result that you can say, okay, you use a similar cleaning method, what are the differences you can see? So in summary, I would like to say that both multiband and multiband multi-echoes, more or less, they have the similar interesting sensitivity. It actually, so you can use both if you want to use, and without cleaning, they have the similar, but it does change a bit when you use a similar kind of cleaning method between the different kind of resting state networks. And we would also like to say here a few points that the Smith network that we use for dual regression are a bit biased toward multiband multi-echo data, because in multiband multi-echo, you still have the signal from the inhomogeneous region of the brain that you didn't have in single echo EPI. So we are thinking of making our own template and then testing against our own template, and we might find some huge differences between these two sequences. But if we use the standard template in the literature, then we don't find any huge differences. But this is the reason that Smith is really biased toward multiband multi-echo. And the last, if there is no difference between multiband multi-echo and multiband, then I would say I would recommend multiband multi-echo. If you want to use, you should use multiband multi-echo, because it is less distorted and you have more signal, and then you will have a better co-registration, and it will improve the group analysis anyways. So that would be the discussing point. And in conclusion, I would say that both of these sequences have a really good intrinsic sensitivity. It really depends upon what kind of cleaning method you use and what kind of analysis pipeline you use, but the differences in the sequence is not huge. The differences in the processing and the cleaning you are using is larger than the differences in the sequences. But we are still trying to find out, to develop our own template and to still figure out where these differences can be coming from. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So we got one question over there.
Missed it, but have you compared the temporal SNR maps between the two sequences initially before you run all the cleaning? Because, I mean, if you see already SNR differences and you used a very high multiband factor of 6, it might cause or might lead to some signal loss in certain brain regions.
Yeah, we did compare the temporal SNR, but we didn't find a significant loss in different sequences, actually. The TSNR was quite good between these two different sequences. So I didn't put it here, but I can show that tomorrow. I have a poster, so we can look into that, and then I can show you the TSNR maps. So they are really good, actually.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? All right, so if there are no more questions, we'll conclude this session. Let's thank our speakers again.